The scale said Agnes Whitlock's best steer weighed 712 pounds, and every man in the Sable Draw yard knew the number was a lie. The red steer stood broad through the chest, heavy over the ribs, and finished better than any animal Agnes had sent to sale since Frederick died. She had watched him gain through the last cold weeks herself. Darius Ketch watched the beam instead. It rose beneath the narrow hood, hesitated, as though caught on something, then dropped into place. 712, his clerk called. One of the two buyers beside Ketch scratched the figure into a notebook. The other looked over the steer without meeting Agnes's eyes. Agnes kept one gloved hand on the corral rail. Run him again. Ketch's smile held the patience men used when they wished to make a woman's certainty look childish. The scale has settled, Mrs. Whitlock. It caught. Portable equipment moves. That doesn't make it dishonest. Run him again. The second reading came within 3 pounds of the first. Ketch spread his hands. There, consistent. Consistent was not the same as true. Agnes stepped through the gate and laid her palm against the steer's side. The animal's hide twitched beneath her glove. He had not been denied water. He had not been overdriven. His condition was visible to anyone willing to see it. Bring the ranch weight, she said. Calvin Sloat did not move. For 6 years he had served as Sable Draw's foreman. That morning he stood closer to Ketch than to her. Agnes, he said, will lose the buyers. Then let them watch. Sloat's mouth flattened. He turned toward the weigh shed at last. The black iron test weight had belonged to Sable Draw longer than Agnes had. 50 pounds, cast thick through the base, with a crescent chip along one edge and 3 punched dots beneath the handle where her father had marked it years ago. Sloat carried it out with both hands and set it beside the scale. Ketch glanced at the iron. That old piece may be worn. Iron does not wear 7 pounds away while sitting in a locked chest. Agnes bent to lift one side. A stranger's gloved hand reached the handle from the other. She looked up. The cowboy had arrived less than an hour earlier on a rangy bay and asked Tom Weller where a man might find work. Dust had settled into the seams of his coat. He was tall, without making a display of it, and his face had the weathered stillness of someone accustomed to waiting on animals more than impressing men. Their fingers touched through leather. Neither held the contact. Together they raised the weight onto Ketch's platform. The beam climbed, caught in the same place, and settled. The clerk stared at the mark, 43. No one spoke for a breath. Then Ketch laughed. There's your answer. The ranch weight is false. Agnes turned the iron so the crescent chip faced him. This weight balanced true before my father died. And when was it last checked? It has been locked. Locked things can still be wrong. Ketch nodded toward the cattle. You have 20 steers ready and 2 buyers standing here. I can still offer a fair price based on the scale. A fair price begins with an honest weight. One buyer closed his notebook. The other shifted toward Ketch's wagon. Sloat stepped close enough that only the nearby men could hear him. Take the offer. You can argue after the cattle are sold. Agnes faced him. After they are gone, the argument belongs to Ketch. You're risking the spring note over pride. My husband is dead, Calvin. My judgment did not die with him. Color climbed Sloat's neck. He pulled the foreman's key ring from his belt and dropped it into her palm. Iron struck leather. Then use your judgment without me. 3 hands standing near the barn exchanged glances. Sloat had promised them advances if they left with him, and Agnes saw the decision pass before any man said it aloud. Tom remained by the gate. Eli Crane lowered his head. The other three walked toward the bunkhouse for their rolls. Sloat turned away. The way-shed key is there. Agnes closed her hand around the ring. She did not know that months earlier he had ordered a duplicate of the old chest key and kept it hidden. All she saw was the key he returned and the men he took. Behind her, the steer in the narrow gate threw his head. Ketch's clerk had raised a stick to drive him backward. The animal lunged, caught the lead rope beneath a rail, and began choking against it. Men shouted. Dust burst under his hooves. The stranger moved before Ketch did, but he did not seize control from Agnes. He stepped to the steer's blind side, lowered his shoulders, and reduced the pressure around the animal rather than adding to it. "Cut the rope?" he asked. Agnes already had her knife out. Yes. He took it from her open hand, sliced the fouled line, and stepped clear. The steer stumbled once, then stood blowing free of the rail. The cowboy returned the knife handle first. Ketch's clerk lowered the stick. "You damage my equipment again. Your equipment nearly killed her steer," the cowboy said. His voice stayed level. Ketch studied him. Name, Micah Doran. Recognition sharpened Ketch's face. Of course it is. Agnes heard the history in those 4 words, but this was not the hour to ask for it. Ketch ordered the scale loaded. "When you come to your senses, Mrs. Whitlock, the price will be lower. Then save yourself the return trip." Wagons rolled through the gate. Sloat and the 3 departing hands followed on horseback. The yard felt larger after they left and far more dangerous. Agnes counted what remained. 600 cattle, 3 dependable workers, 1 uncertain spring market, and a stranger Ketch clearly hated. Micah stood beside the black iron weight. "You came looking for work," she said. "Yes, ma'am. 30 days, working wages. You do not sell cattle, hire men, dismiss men, borrow against this ranch, or promise anything in my name. You take orders from me." "And the daily cattle work? You earn the right to advise before you earn the right to direct." Micah considered that without offense. Fair. Agnes drew out the cracked silver watch that had belonged to her father and opened the case. The hands moved beneath the divided crystal. 30 days, she said. You won't last a month here. Micah glanced toward the road where Ketch's wagon had disappeared. Maybe not. He bent, tapped the test weight lightly with a wrench from the scale platform, and listened to the clear ring. But whatever is lying, it isn't this. That evening, Agnes locked the weight inside the iron-bound chest in the weigh shed, tested the returned key twice, and carried the ring back to the house. By sunset, Sable Draw had lost a buyer, a foreman, and 3 hands. It had gained 1 blacklisted cowboy and a question worth more than the cattle Ketch had tried to steal by the pound. By sunrise, Agnes had learned how quickly 600 cattle could make 3 loyal hands feel like none. Tom Weller was already at the North Corral, favoring his stiff knee while he reset a gate pin. Eli Crane had taken the younger hand to the horse lot, where too many saddles waited on too few rested animals. Micah Doran stood beside his rangy bay with the reins loose in one hand. He had saddled before being asked, but he had not issued a single order. Agnes crossed the yard in her work coat. You are awake early for a man hired by the month. Cattle don't know the agreement starts after breakfast. His gaze moved toward the south pasture. I would like to see what Sloat left you. You saw enough yesterday to offer opinions. I saw a dishonest-looking beam and 1 frightened steer. He nodded toward the open range. I haven't seen your water, your horses, or where the finishing cattle have been held. And you intend to inspect all of it, if you ride with me. The request stopped her more effectively than a command would. have. Sloat had inspected the ranch alone and returned with conclusions Agnes was expected to accept. Micah asked her to come because the land belonged to her and because he did not yet know it. 10 minutes, she said. Then I decide whether the rest of your morning belongs to this tour. They rode east first, where the river-fed ditch narrowed into 2 shallow tanks. The upper tank held clean water. The lower one carried a skin of mud where too many cattle had crowded the same bank. Salt blocks lay within easy reach of the water, drawing the animals back to the trampled ground. Micah dismounted and pressed 2 fingers into the hoof-cut mud. How long have these been here? Since before Frederick died. They were moved once last summer, Agnes added. Sloat put them back. Why? He said cattle drank better when they found salt nearby. Micah glanced at the churned bank. They drink more often, not better. He did not say it as correction to her. He said it toward the ground, as if the evidence deserved the first answer. Agnes pointed to a low rise beyond the cottonwoods. There is firmer ground there. Too far for weak stock. Not if we move the blocks in stages, he nodded. Your choice. They continued to the horse lot. 6 geldings stood with dried sweat under their winter coats, and girth marks rubbed tender. 4 other horses were fresh enough to pull at the fence and challenge one another over space. Micah rested his hand on the rail. Who rode the gray? Tom, because Sloat said the animal needed a steady seat. The gray is carrying soreness behind the withers. Tom's saddle sits wide on him. You knew. I told Sloat to change the pairing. Agnes pointed to the fresh animals. The bay mare is mine. The sorrel is green but honest. The dun bites when cinched. The black gelding will not tolerate a rope brushing his hind legs. Micah looked from the horses to her. Then, why are the tired 6 still carrying most of the work? Because Sloat preferred men, riding the animals he knew. Even when the animals stopped carrying the men well. Agnes heard the judgment, but it was aimed where it belonged. He asked, Will you give me 3 days to change the rotation? Not without terms. Tom gets the bay gelding after I check his saddle. Eli takes the sorrel only with Tom beside him. The dun works from the ground until someone earns his trust. Your mare stays yours. And the cattle? I need to see them first. The finishing steers stood on the dry south patch beneath a pale April sky, their hides dulled by dust. They were not starved. Sloat had been too clever for damage. That obvious. He had kept them moving just enough to burn condition and left them grazing where the spring growth had already thinned. Micah rode the edge of the group without pushing them. How many days here? 9. Agnes watched one red steer stop chewing and lower his head. Too many. Where would you move them? He asked. She looked north toward a shallow draw where snowmelt had lingered under the sage. The draw below the upper bench. Grass came early there. How soft is the ground. Firm along the east side, boggy near the center. Then we use your east approach. He turned his horse back toward her. 3 days. I rotate the mounts, move the finishing cattle in smaller groups, and pair Tom with Eli. No hiring, no dismissing, no promises in your name. You remember quickly. I have reasons. She let the unanswered part remain between them. 3 days, she said. You report to me before every major move. Agreed. The first test came before noon. Eli and the younger hand were easing a small group toward the draw when a thin-ribbed steer stumbled, went to one knee, and collapsed on its side. Eli pulled his rifle from the saddle scabbard. Micah raised one hand. Hold. He's done, Eli said. Agnes was already dismounting. No, he is not. She pressed her palm against the steer's neck and watched the breath working too fast beneath the hide. No foam, No swelling, no broken limb. Exhaustion, she said. Dry feed and too much distance yesterday. Eli kept the rifle across his lap. He won't make the draw, not with men crowding him. Micah slid from his saddle but did not touch the animal. Where is the nearest shade? Agnes pointed toward a shallow cut lined with young willow. 50 yards east. Water, a seep behind it. Not enough for the whole group. Enough for one steer. He turned to Eli. Take the others forward at a walk. Leave the gate open behind you. Eli hesitated. Agnes said, Do it. The young man obeyed. When the pressure of the group moved away, the fallen steer lifted his head. Micah waited. Agnes waited with him. After several minutes, the animal folded its legs beneath itself, rose unsteadily, and followed them toward the willow cut. Partial answer. The steer was not dying. The larger question was how many others had been pushed close to the same edge. By evening, the first group had settled in the shallow draw. Tom reported that the fresh horses had completed the work without one stumble. Eli said nothing about the rifle. He cleaned it and returned it to the scabbard. A rider from Boise arrived near dusk with a folded message from Ketch. No buyer associated with his yard would bid on Sable Draw cattle unless Agnes reopened negotiations under his stated weight. She read the note once and placed it in her account book. He moved quickly. Micah said from the office doorway. He expected me to refuse, or Sloat told him you would. Micah remained outside the threshold. Who has the midnight watch? Tom. His knee will be worse after today. Then Eli. Ellie nearly shot a steer that needed rest. Agnes studied him. You are asking for the watch? Midnight to 3. No extra pay until I have worked it. You will need the field glasses. The weak cattle may settle beyond the first rise. She took them from a peg beside the door and held them out. Micah reached for the leather-wrapped barrels. His fingers brushed hers, bare skin against bare skin this time. The contact was brief. He took only the glasses. I will return them before breakfast. Near midnight, Agnes crossed the dark office to close the account book and noticed a folded scrap pressed beneath the back hinge. It had been hidden where someone clearing the desk might miss it, but a departing foreman could retrieve it later. She opened it beneath the lamp. The writing was Sloat's, 5 words, followed by Ketch's name in the margin. Ketch will pay the balance when Whitlock sells. Outside, Micah's horse moved softly past the window as he began the watch no one had ordered him to take. Agnes placed the scrap beside Ketch's message. The scale had not been the beginning of the theft. It had only been the place where the theft was meant to look respectable. The note stayed in Agnes's account book until April 19th, when suspicion had gathered enough weight to require a witness outside Sable Draw. Before sunrise, she unlocked the iron-bound chest in the weigh shed, checked the crescent chip and 3 punched dots, then wrapped the 50-pound weight in sacking and secured it behind the buckboard seat. Micah brought the team around without asking what she intended to prove. Boys City, he said. Amos Bell's blacksmith shop first. A merchant's waits after that. You trust Bell? I trust him to remember iron. Micah climbed to the driver's side. That may be more useful. The road east was firm in the high places and rutted where spring water crossed the lower cuts. Agnes kept Sloat's note and Ketch's message inside the account book beneath her feet. Neither paper proved how the scale had cheated her. One showed motive. The other showed pressure. The iron behind them was the only object that might answer without changing its story. Near the second creek crossing, the right wheel dropped into a rut hidden by muddy water. The buckboard tilted hard. Agnes caught the seat edge, but her shoulder moved toward the open side. Micah's hand closed around her forearm and held her against the bench until the wheel climbed free. He released her before the wagon settled. No apology shaped as ownership. No joke to make the touch smaller. "Road narrows beyond the cottonwoods," he said. "I can walk the team through." Agnes flexed her fingers once. "Drive it." He did. Boise City had fully awakened by the time they reached Amos Bell's shop. Hammer blows rang from the open doors. Freight wagons stood nose to tail along the street, and the smell of hot iron cut through coal smoke and horse sweat. Amos came out, wiping his hands on his apron. He was broad through the waist, gray at the beard, and old enough to remember Agnes before she became Frederick Whitlock's wife. Mrs. Whitlock. His eyes shifted to Micah and then to the wrapped iron. "What have you brought me?" Agnes uncovered the weight. "Tell me whether you know it before I tell you why." Amos crouched, turned the iron, and ran one blackened thumb over the crescent chip. Then he lifted the handle and found the 3 punched dots. "Your father's mark. You remember making them?" "I remember him complaining that every ranch hand borrowed weights and returned the wrong one, said 3 dots would save him from accusing honest men." Amos straightened. "What is the question?" "Whether 50 pounds is still 50. He did not laugh. That earned him more trust than reassurance would have. Amos brought out his shop weights and a short balance beam used for checking heavy fittings. He tested the apparatus empty, then placed the Sable Draw weight against known pieces, totaling 50 pounds. The beam settled almost level. He shifted the weight, cleared grit from the platform, and repeated the comparison. The result held. "Near enough for ranch work," he said. "Closer than any portable yard scale needs to be." "I want another comparison." Amos nodded toward a dry goods merchant 2 doors down. "Harlan keeps stamped counterweights for bulk goods. He'll complain about the trouble, but he'll enjoy having an opinion." Harlan complained exactly as promised. He also compared the iron against his own weights while Amos watched. The Sable Draw, weight balanced within a fraction, no cattle contract could turn into 7 missing pounds. Agnes asked both men to write only what they had observed. Amos recorded the marks, the 2 comparisons, and the result. Harlan signed beneath him. No accusation against Ketch. No conclusion about his scale. Agnes folded the statement into her account book. "This proves my weight is honest," she said outside the shop. "It does not prove how his scale lied." Micah stood beside the buckboard with one hand on the wrapped iron. "No, you knew it would not be enough. I hoped it might be. That is not the same answer." He secured the sacking before facing her. The street moved around them. Wagon wheels shouted prices, a boy carrying telegraph slips between offices. Micah's attention remained on Agnes. "I worked Ketch's yard 3 years ago." She waited. 1 season. Cattle came through looking heavier than the figures he paid on. Not once. Over and over. "What did you do?" "Watched the beam." His jaw tightened. It caught before it settled, same as yesterday. "Did you examine the scale?" "No. Ketch kept his clerk at it." "Did you compare the cattle elsewhere?" "Not in a way I could prove. A few lots looked right later at the rail pens, but I had no written record. And still you accused him, in front of 2 buyers." "What happened?" Micah did not soften the sequence. "The clerk called me a lying drifter. Said no honest yard would hire me. I struck him." "After he struck you?" "No." The answer came without delay. "I struck first." Agnes looked down the street toward the merchant offices where a man's reputation could travel faster than a wagon. 1 blow, 1. "Ketch had 3 men throw me out. By the next week," Every buyer's yard between Boise and the rail line knew my name. You may have been right about the weights. I was wrong about the blow, and the blow made your accusation easier to bury. Yes, he said nothing about provocation, pride, or fairness. He gave her the damaging truth and left it where she could judge it. Agnes climbed into the buckboard. I will not build a case on your grievance. Micah took the reins. You shouldn't? Then what should I trust? He looked toward the road home. What I do next? They reached Sable Draw near sunset. Agnes returned the black iron weight to the locked chest before attending to anything else. She tested the lock twice and carried the key ring with her. In the south pasture, the finishing cattle had already begun recovering under the slower rotation. Their sides looked fuller. Their movement had lost some of the dull heaviness Sloat's handling had produced. Agnes and Micah rode through them at a walk. We need animals we can follow from now until the next sale, she said, not just the largest. Similar age, similar frame, similar condition, and markings no rain can wash away. They selected 4, a red-sided steer with a white notch near the right hip, one with a blunt left horn, another with a dark ring around one eye. The 4th carried a narrow white line along the belly. Micah marked temporary numbers in chalk, but Agnes recorded the natural signs in her book. These would be the same animals tracked through every change in feed, water, rest, and travel. No replacement without a written reason. No claim that memory alone had preserved the truth. Tom Weller approached from the old feed shed, carrying a folded work order he had found behind a loose board. Sloat's writing, he said. Agnes opened it. The order was dated 3 days before Ketch's failed purchase. It directed the finished steers into the dry lot at dusk and forbade water for 12 hours before weighing. At the bottom, Sloat had written that Ketch's clerk had approved the arrangement. Micah read over her shoulder without touching the paper. He meant to take weight off the cattle before the scale took the rest. Agnes placed the order beside Amos Bell's statement and the payment note. The case was beginning to take shape, but its center remained empty. They could prove the ranch weight was honest. They could prove Sloat had weakened the cattle. They could prove Ketch expected Agnes to sell. What they could not yet prove was how a 50-pound iron became 43 without changing at all. By April 26th, the missing 7 pounds had become less urgent than the pounds Micah was putting back on the herd. The finishing steers no longer crossed the same dry ground twice in a day. Salt had been moved in stages to firmer ground above the lower tank. The grey gelding's rubbed back was healing. Tom Weller's saddle had been shifted to a broader bay, and Eli Crane rode the young sorrel under supervision instead of exhausting the older horses because they felt safer. None of it solved Ketch's scale. It did something Agnes needed first. It stopped Sable Draw from helping him cheat. Micah gave his reports from the office threshold each evening. He never entered unless Agnes called him in. North Group took water before noon, he said on the first night. No crowding at the lower bank. Red steer with the white hip mark held condition. Agnes checked the figures in her book. How long did you keep them moving? 1 hour and 12 minutes. Too long on the return. They did not show strain. They crossed the lower wash. Yes, Agnes set down her pencil. Bitterweed comes up there after spring rain. The first growth is low enough to disappear beneath grass. Micah did not defend the route. How soon after rain? 2 days if the ground stays warm. It rained 3 nights ago. Then the lower wash closes until I inspect it. Micah turned toward the yard. Tom, The older rider looked up from the hitching rail. Tomorrow's group takes the east shelf. Mrs. Whitlock says the lower wash is unsafe. No hesitation, no private complaint saved for the men. Tom nodded once. East shelf. Micah faced Agnes again. Anything else? She had expected resistance because competence often made men protective of their own decisions. Instead, he had treated correction as useful information. Check the black gelding's left hind before you assign him, she said. He dragged the toe last autumn. I will. By the next week, the work had acquired a rhythm that belonged neither to Sloat's habits nor to Micah's pride. Agnes approved pasture changes. Micah determined how the cattle reached them. Tom carried the difficult flank without being forced onto the sore-kneed work. Eli learned that a rifle was not the first answer to every animal that went down. The younger hand stopped rushing gates because Micah made him repeat each move slowly until cattle flowed without striking the rails. When a feed merchant from Boise offered Micah credit for sacks Agnes had not ordered, Micah sent the man to the office. I run cattle, he said. Mrs. Whitlock buys feed. The merchant glanced past him toward Agnes as if waiting for embarrassment. She gave him none. And today I am buying nothing, she said. The man left with his wagon still loaded. That evening, Micah reported a gain in the marked steer's condition and a decline in some small injuries among the crew. He did not take credit for either. He named the causes: shorter drives, fresher horses, cleaner water approaches, and men no longer working beyond fatigue because Sloat wanted visible speed. You make it sound simple, Agnes said. Most useful things are simple after someone stops making money from confusion. The answer followed her into the night. 2 days later, a notice arrived for a cattleman's gathering at Miller's warehouse in Boise City. Buyers would discuss summer prices, rail space, and drought risk. Agnes had attended such meetings beside Frederick. Since his death, invitations still came, but men often spoke around her until she forced them to remember whose cattle they wanted. She folded the notice and carried it to the yard. Micah was checking a cinch near the corral. You are coming to Boise with me tomorrow. He straightened. As what? The man directing my daily range work. Ketch will be there. That is one reason you are coming. He will use me against you. Then do not help him. Micah held her gaze. Understood. The road to Boise City took most of the morning by buckboard. Spring had dried the higher stretches, though meltwater still cut shallow ruts near the cottonwoods. Micah drove without filling the distance with warnings. Agnes reviewed cattle figures and the notes stored in her account book. Ketch's refusal, Sloat's promised payment, Amos Bell's written comparison, and the order withholding water. Enough to establish a pattern. Not enough to prove the scale's mechanism. Miller's warehouse smelled of grain dust, wool coats, and coffee burned black in a tin pot. Ranchers stood in loose groups around stacked crates, while buyers posted preliminary prices on a chalkboard. Darius Ketch occupied the center without appearing to claim it. His influence did the work. When Agnes entered with Micah, conversation thinned. Ketch smiled. Mrs. Whitlock, I had heard you brought your grievance to Boise. I brought cattle figures with an escort. Several men looked at Micah. Recognition moved among those who knew Ketch's version of the old assault. Micah Doran, one buyer said. The yard hand who struck a clerk. I struck him, Micah answered. That part is true. Ketch lifted his brows as if surprised by the admission, and now he advises a widow on honest business. Agnes stepped beside Micah, not behind him. Mr. Doran's prior conduct was wrong. His current work is sound. Ketch's amusement faded slightly. You trust a violent man because he tells you what you want to hear. I trust records. Under his direction, my finishing cattle have regained condition. My horses are carrying fairer loads, and my men have lost fewer working hours to injury. Your husband understood that cattle trade requires more than kindness. Frederick's name entered the room like a hand laid on property. Ketch did not. Own. Agnes kept her voice level. My husband has been dead 20 months. Sable Draw's deed, accounts, cattle, and decisions belong to me. A rancher near the coffee table lowered his cup. Ketch gestured toward Micah. Then dismiss him. I will reopen negotiations, and this unpleasantness can end before summer. You are offering buyer access in exchange for choosing my employees. I am offering prudence. No, you are asking me to prove your pressure works. Ketch's eyes hardened. You may discover pride is expensive. Then send the bill to the woman whose name is on the ranch. No one laughed. Agnes did not need them to. She had not come for applause. She had come to place one fact in the room where Ketch conducted business. Micah directed the daily range work because she had granted that authority, and Ketch could not remove him by insulting either of them. Outside, Micah helped her into the buckboard but said nothing until the warehouse disappeared behind them. You did not have to defend me. I defended an accurate record. There were easier ways to answer him. Easier for whom? Micah considered that. Not for you. No. The road narrowed near a washed-out shoulder. The right wheel dipped, and Agnes placed her hand on Micah's forearm before the jolt reached them. This time, there was no need for him to catch her. She had chosen the contact in advance. Muscle tightened beneath his coat as he steadied the reins. He did not cover her hand. He did not turn the moment into a question she had not invited. Agnes left her palm there until the wheel climbed back onto firm ground. Then she withdrew it. Micah's voice remained even. The east shelf will need another water stop if the heat rises. Put one near the cottonwoods, not beside the bank. I will. They reached Sable Draw near dusk. Tom waited at the main gate with dust on his hat and concern set deep around his mouth. A freight man came through from Nampa, he said. Ketch bought the other portable scale. Wagon, beam, fittings, all of it. Agnes looked toward the weigh shed, where her honest 50-pound weight remained locked inside the iron-bound chest. Ketch had failed to make her accept his number. Now he meant to make certain there was no other number she could use. Ketch's purchase of the last available portable scale left Agnes with a ranch full of improving cattle and no honest place to sell them. By May 3rd, that contradiction governed every decision at Sable Draw. Micah could restore condition. He could reduce injuries. He could keep tired horses from being worked into lameness. None of it mattered at market if Ketch remained free to invent the number on the other side of the beam. Agnes refused to let that uncertainty poison work already proving its worth. She kept records. Under Sloat's last 2 weeks, 5 injuries had cost time: a crushed toe, 2 rope burns, a wrenched shoulder, and Tom Weller's swollen knee after a needless 12-hour day. Under Micah's direction, there had been 1 bruised ankle and a cut thumb. No lost cattle, no lost workday. The 4 marked steers held their condition, and the red-sided one, with the white notch, had begun filling through the ribs again. Micah never asked Agnes whether the figures had changed her opinion of him. Each evening he gave his report from the office threshold, accepted whatever correction followed, and returned to the yard. That made the approaching 30th day harder than she had expected. On the morning of May 14th, Agnes found him beside the North Corral, checking a replacement pin Tom had fitted into the gate. The sun had already warmed the packed earth. Cottonwood leaves flashed along the ditch, and the cattle beyond the fence stood calm enough to graze instead of pressing the rails. "Your month ends tomorrow," she said. Micah tested the pin once more before straightening. "Yes, you have not asked what happens after." The agreement was 30 days. That is not an answer. He rested one hand on the rail. "I don't intend to leave unless you tell me to." The directness reached her before she could prepare for it. Agnes kept her attention on the cattle. "I am offering you acting range boss wages through summer." Micah did not smile. He listened. "Daily cattle movement, horse rotation, crew assignments, and work safety are yours," she continued. "Sales, hiring, dismissal, contracts, loans, and property decisions remain mine. You report to me each evening. If I reverse an order, you follow the reversal before you argue its wisdom. May I argue afterward? Once. Fair. The higher wage begins tomorrow." He glanced toward Eli Crane and the youngest hand, who were resetting a water trough beyond the barn. They should receive 10 cents more a day through summer. Agnes turned back to him. "You negotiate quickly for a man who has not accepted his own wages." They covered work left by 3 men. They did it without leaving the horses standing saddled half the night. "Ellie nearly shot a steer on your second day, and he has not reached for the rifle first since." Micah nodded toward the younger hand. He was rushing gates. Now he can move a group without striking a rail. Agnes had already seen the same improvements. What mattered was that Micah named their growth instead of collecting it under his own success. "The raise holds if attendance and work hold," she said. "Agreed. Then you accept the position? Through summer under the terms you gave. No gratitude offered as obedience. No claim that the ranch needed him more than he needed wages." Agnes extended her hand. Micah took it. The grip was brief, workmanlike, and settled a question neither of them had wanted to ask too soon. Before noon, the ranch reminded them how little any agreement mattered to a frightened horse. Eli had brought a young gelding into the lower corral for groundwork. The animal had accepted the halter and 2 slow turns, then caught sight of a loose rope coil dragging near his hind legs. He lunged sideways. The youngest hand stepped back into the wrong space and trapped one boot between the rope and a gatepost. Eli grabbed for the lead. The horse pulled harder. Micah crossed the corral at a run. "Let the lead go." Eli released it. The gelding wheeled, tightening the rope around the post. Micah seized the line with his right hand and hauled enough slack into it for the younger man to wrench his boot free. The rope burned across Micah's palm before Tom swung the gate open and Agnes drove the frightened horse's attention toward clear space. The gelding shot through, circled once, and stopped near the far rail, trembling but unhurt. Micah opened his hand. The skin across the palm had been stripped red in a broad line. "Pump water," he said. "No," Agnes answered. "The trough is dirty. It needs cleaning now, and it will be cleaned properly." She turned to Tom. "Take the gelding to the small pen. No rope near his hindquarters. Eli, check the boy's ankle." Then she faced Micah. "Office. Agnes, that was not a request." He followed. Inside, she set a basin of warm water on the table and placed clean cloth, soap, and salve beside it. Micah stood with his injured hand half closed. "Sit. It is a burn, not a broken arm." "Then sitting should not defeat you," he sat. Agnes reached for his glove, then stopped. "May I?" The question altered his face more than pain had. "Yes." She eased the leather away from the damaged skin. Micah's fingers tensed once, but he did not pull back. Dirt and rope fiber clung to the burn. Agnes washed them free slowly, rinsing the cloth until the water clouded. His hand was large in hers, roughened by rains and work, but he made no attempt to turn care into intimacy. He watched what she did. Nothing more. No hard line for 3 days, she said. Tom can take it. Tom's knee can handle short work if the horses are rotated. Eli can handle more than he could last month. You just argued for that. The corner of Micah's mouth moved. I did. Agnes spread salve over the burn. Her thumb rested near the inside of his wrist while she wound the bandage across his palm. His pulse beat steady beneath her touch. She tied the cloth and released him first. Keep it clean. If the bandage darkens, change it. Yes, ma'am. Do not use that tone. What tone? The one that pretends obedience is a private joke. This time the smile appeared fully, though it did not last. I will follow the order. A rider arrived near dusk, carrying Ketch's summer contract. Agnes read it at the office desk, while Micah stood outside the threshold with his bandaged hand held away from the doorframe. Ketch's proposed price assumed cattle weights lower than the condition records supported. Beneath that figure sat a second deduction for shrink during holding and transport. He means to take the pounds twice, Agnes said, once at the beam and once on paper. Micah did not ask to see the contract until she handed it to him. He read the terms, then returned the pages without creasing them. If you refuse, he closes the yard. It is already closed. Then he wants you afraid of summer more than angry about spring. Agnes folded the contract and placed it beside Sloat's note and the no-water order. He will have to wait. Outside, Tom called that the evening cattle shift was ready. Micah glanced at his wrapped palm. I can time the change without taking a rope. Agnes drew the cracked silver watch from her vest. Short shifts. 20 minutes on the first group, 15 if the heat holds. She placed the watch in his left hand. The silver case looked smaller against his work-worn fingers. Return it tonight. I will. In the yard, Eli saw the watch and grinned. Range boss for 1 day, and he has already won more than wages. Micah closed the case. I borrowed a tool. Nothing in his voice invited another joke. The work ended after sunset. Agnes was closing the account book when Micah appeared at the office door. He held the watch by its chain in his uninjured hand. 20 minutes on the first group, 17 on the second. No crowding. Agnes crossed to him and opened her palm. He placed the watch there without letting the chain linger between them, returned as promised. Tomorrow begins summer wages, she said. The month was the simple part. Micah looked past her toward the darkened yard, where the cattle had settled and Ketch's unsigned contract lay waiting on the desk. Summer will tell us what the work costs. Ketch's unsigned contract told Agnes exactly how much silence might cost by summer, but it did not tell her how to make a dishonest scale confess. On May 16th, she unlocked the iron-bound chest in the weigh shed and carried the black iron test weight into the yard with Micah beside her. His right palm no longer required the full bandage. A narrow strip of cloth protected the tenderest skin, and Tom Weller handled the heavy rope while Micah directed the work with his left hand. They set a timber beam across 2 stout supports beside the feed room. One end carried an empty grain sack. The other carried the 50-pound iron. Agnes checked the crescent chip and the 3 punched dots before they began. This will not weigh cattle, she said. No, Micah answered. It will tell us whether 50 pounds keeps being 50 when Ketch isn't near it. They balanced the iron against known feed loads, changed the sack, cleared grit from the support, and repeated the test. Each time the beam settled where it should. The result did not prove Ketch's mechanism. It did remove another excuse. Agnes returned the weight to the locked chest before discussing what came next. The 4 steers selected in April grazed beyond the west fence, their temporary chalk numbers renewed, but their natural markings unchanged. The red-sided steer still carried the white notch near his right hip. The blunt-horned animal stayed close to him. The dark-ringed steer and the one with the narrow white belly line followed in the same loose pair. "Those 4, Agnes said. "We track them through every condition until the next sale." Micah rested his left hand on the fence rail. Same feed, same water, same rest, same road, as close as we can manage. Immediate, weighing on both scales. And witnesses who do not work for either side. Micah considered the problem as work rather than impossibility. 2 ranchers. 2 who do not owe Ketch money. That shortens the list. A freight representative as well. Someone whose wages do not rise or fall with the cattle price. Nampa has a platform, scale, and a rail agent who may not welcome a private quarrel in his yard. Then we give him measurements, not accusations. Agnes opened her account book and wrote the 4 identification marks beneath the April records. "You control the cattle. I control the weight and the witnesses." Micah nodded. "No animal is replaced without a written reason. No water withheld for appearance. No crowding before the platform." Agnes glanced toward him. "You have thought about this before." 3 years ago, I thought anger would make men listen." His voice held no defense. "This time, I would rather make it difficult for them to lie." That was the question the plan needed to answer. Not whether Ketch would admit fraud, whether Agnes could arrange the facts so his admission no longer mattered. By May 20th, Micah's palm had healed enough to leave the protective strip off during light work. He still avoided hard line, and he did not conceal the limitation from the crew. The 4 steers entered a measured routine. Feed times were noted. Water intervals were kept steady. Agnes named Samuel Vane as one possible ranch witness because he sold through several yards and owed Ketch nothing. Micah suggested Silas Reed, who had argued with Ketch over freight deductions the previous autumn. The framework was incomplete, but it had moved beyond suspicion. Ketch arrived before noon on May 21st in a polished buggy with 1 clerk and a leather document case. Agnes met him outside the office. Micah stood near the corral, close enough to hear and far enough that Ketch could not claim the meeting had been arranged as a threat. "Mrs. Whitlock," Ketch said, "I have come to end an unnecessary dispute. Then bring an honest scale. You continue to mistake stubbornness for evidence." He opened the case and handed her a folded offer. The price was higher than the one she had rejected. High enough to tempt any rancher facing summer heat, reduced buyer access, and a crew already stretched thin. The final page contained the actual purchase. Agnes read it twice. She and every person employed by Sable Draw would agree not to discuss Ketch's weighing methods, scale readings, shrink terms, or buyer arrangements with any rancher, merchant, freight agent, public officer, or competing yard. "You are buying silence," she said. "I am buying cattle and finality. Finality does not require my men to forget what they saw. Your men saw an old ranch weight behave badly on modern equipment. My weight balanced true in Boise City." Ketch's clerk shifted at that. Ketch did not. "Then you should be pleased by this price. Why would an honest buyer pay extra to prevent comparison?" His smile thinned. "Because public quarrels damage everyone involved, not equally." Agnes tore the silence page once, then again, and placed the pieces inside his open document case. "The offer is refused." Ketch's attention moved to Micah. "And what does your range boss advise?" "He advises on cattle. Convenient." Ketch stepped away from the buggy. "Doran knows what happens to men who accuse buyers without proof. 3 years, without a respectable yard hiring him, should have taught the lesson." Micah's shoulders tightened. His hands remained visible. "Mr. Ketch," Agnes said, "you are speaking to me. I am trying to save you from a man who mistakes a grudge for loyalty." Ketch moved closer to Micah. "How long will wages keep you righteous this time? Another month? Until the widow grows tired of paying?" Micah's right hand curled once, then opened. He did not advance. He looked toward Agnes. "Do you want him off the property?" "Yes." Micah walked to the gate, opened it, and stood aside. "You heard Mrs. Whitlock." Ketch waited for a threat. None came. He gathered the torn paper into his case and climbed into the buggy, with less grace than he had arrived. "When summer closes around you," he said, "this price will look generous." Agnes answered, "Then I will remember what you wanted hidden inside it." The buggy rolled out. Micah closed the gate without watching Ketch disappear. Agnes saw the effort in the set of his jaw and the measured breath he released afterward. "Did you want to strike him?" she asked. "Yes. Why did you not?" He glanced toward the office where the torn silence clause had lain between them. "Because wanting it did not make the consequence yours to carry." Agnes had no ready answer. The stronger response was already in the yard. Ketch gone, no blow struck, no authority taken from her. On the evening of May 24, Agnes stood beside the west pasture gate with the cracked silver watch open in her palm. Micah intended to time a practice movement of the 4 steers from water to the holding pen. The sky was clear, the light thinning gold over the sage. 20 minutes after they drink, she said. Longer if they crowd, and if they move cleanly, record it. Do not shorten the next interval merely because this one goes well. She held out the watch. Micah reached with his left hand. The chain caught across their joined fingers. Agnes did not release it. Neither did he. The case rested between their palms, warmed by her skin and then his. Behind them, a horse shifted in the barn. Leather creaked. Cattle tore grass in slow mouthfuls beyond the fence. Micah's attention moved from the watch to her face. He leaned closer by the width of a breath and stopped. No contact, no assumption. Agnes remained where she was. His healed right hand rose slightly, then settled against the fence rail instead of touching her. The space between them held the unfinished choice. She could step back. She could close it. A horse came hard through the yard before she decided. Eli pulled up near the barn, dust streaked across his face. "West side gate is open," he called. "Not broken. Open." Micah released the chain and closed the watch in his left hand. How many through? More than 200. Agnes turned toward the ridge. Beyond the rise, a dark line of cattle moved through the sage toward the black basalt breaks, where narrow cuts and loose rock could turn. One opened gate into broken legs, dead steers and a summer sale lost before it began. Micah returned the cracked silver watch to Agnes before either of them reached the barn. "You know the wind better than I do," he said. "You keep the time." Then he turned toward the horses and began giving orders. Tom Weller would take the lower flank with him. Eli Crane would stay high enough to see Agnes's signals. The youngest hand would ride for fresh horses and water, not chase cattle into rock. No shouting unless a rider went down, no cutting across the herd. Agnes saddled her mare and rode for the ridge with the watch closed in her fist. The first steers had already reached the basalt breaks. Dust climbed behind them in a dark wall, flattening the late May light and turning riders into shifting shadows. The herd had split into 3 moving bodies. One pressed toward a narrow cut where loose black stone rolled under every hoof. Another bunched behind it, adding weight and fear. The lead animals drove west, blind to the drop beyond the ridge. Micah came alongside Agnes only long enough to ask, "Which route?" His first instinct was visible in the angle of his horse toward the lower wash. Agnes pointed instead toward a pale strip of sage running between 2 shelves of basalt. Her father had used that corridor during dry years, when cattle needed room to turn without seeing the broken ground below. "The pale sage," she said. "The lower wash will bottle them." Micah judged the distance. Wind struck hard enough to carry grit against their faces. "Then we use your route." He wheeled downhill. "Tom, lower flank. Eli, stay where Mrs. Whitlock can see you." He did not argue that the dangerous side belonged to him because he was stronger. He simply took it because she had chosen the plan, and that was where the plan needed him. Agnes opened the watch. The cracked crystal divided the face, but the hands remained clear. Gusts came in rough intervals. 30 seconds of hard wind, a brief easing, then another wall of dust. "We move them between gusts," she told Eli. "Not during." He nodded. Too fast. Fear had tightened his mouth. Below them, Micah and Tom rode sideways to the cattle, asking for space instead of charging into it. Micah's bay slipped once on loose stone and recovered. He raised one arm toward Agnes. Ready. She waited through the next blast. Horn tips appeared and vanished in dust. The watch ticked beneath her thumb. When the wind eased, Agnes swept her hat low toward the pale corridor. Eli moved. Micah answered from below. The herd bent by inches. One steer turned. Another followed. The front line began drifting toward the sage. Then the rear group surged. Tom's horse stumbled when a flat stone rolled beneath its forefoot. Micah crossed behind him to block the cattle from crowding the falling horse. His bay struck the basalt shelf shoulder first. Micah stayed mounted, but the blow twisted him hard. His left arm dropped. Agnes's breath stopped. "Micah!" He lifted his right hand once. Still up, still working, Tom regained his seat, but the larger danger had reached the cut. A dozen steers were entering the narrow mouth. If the herd followed, the animals behind would force them deeper until legs broke or bodies went over the edge. Agnes checked the watch. The next lull would be short. "Ellie, hold here. You're going down? I am opening their sight line." She rode along the shelf toward a high clump of dead sage that hid the pale corridor from the lead steers. The ground broke beneath her mare's front hoof. Agnes leaned back, caught the horn, and kept her seat, but a stiff branch tore through her sleeve and scraped her forearm. Heat ran along the skin. She ignored it, dismounted, and dragged the dead branches clear. The pale corridor opened like a road through black stone. Below, Micah waited for her signal. He did not force his own timing, because delay frightened him. Agnes raised the watch. 5 seconds. 3, 1. The wind eased. She swept her arm toward the opening. Micah pressed the lower flank inward. Eli held the high line. Tom turned the rear group just enough to stop its push. The lead steer saw open ground and took it. The herd followed. Not neatly, not calmly, safely. For the next hour, they worked the cattle through the pale sage, using each lull instead of fighting the wind. When the last animals reached level ground, they spread and lowered their heads. No broken legs, no lost horse. 2 steers carried shallow scrapes. Tom limped after dismounting, but his stiff knee held. Micah slid from the saddle and caught the horn with his right hand when his left shoulder failed him. Agnes reached him before he straightened. "How bad?" "Bruised." You do not know that yet. I can move it. He lifted the arm halfway and stopped. Pain had drained the color beneath the dust on his face. Poorly, Agnes said. His attention dropped to her torn sleeve. And you? A scrape. You do not know that yet. Despite everything, the answer nearly made her smile. Eli returned from checking the rear. The west gate chain was lifted clean, he said, not broken. Agnes looked toward Micah. Sloat knew that latch. So did every man who worked here, Micah answered. Suspicion is not proof. Even hurt, he refused the easy certainty. Tom and Eli rode ahead to bring water and fresh horses. Agnes washed the scrape with canteen water, then checked Micah's shoulder beneath his coat. No unnatural angle, no swelling yet. He sat against a sun-warmed stone while she finished. The cracked watch lay closed in her palm. You changed your route in front of the crew, she said. Yours was better. You waited for my signal. You knew the wind. You could have ordered me away from the edge. Micah's gaze held hers. It was your ranch, your risk, your choice. The words reached deeper than praise. Agnes had spent 20 months hearing that widowhood made every decision suspect. Micah had seen danger and still left the decision with her. She stepped closer, placed one hand against the uninjured side of his face, and kissed him. Briefly, dust, warmth, and the faint taste of wind. He did not take hold of her until she closed the distance. Even then, his right hand stayed against the stone, giving her room to withdraw. Agnes drew back first. That was my choice too. I know. The next morning, Darius Ketch arrived with Calvin Sloat and 3 buyers before Micah's shoulder had stiffened enough to keep him from the yard. Agnes met them beside the main corral in a clean dress, her scrape washed and covered beneath a fresh sleeve. The watch rested in her vest pocket. Micah stood with the crew, left arm held close to his side. Ketch surveyed the recovered herd. An impressive rescue from a gate your new range boss failed to secure. The chain was lifted, Agnes said. Then perhaps your men are careless. Sloat kept his eyes on the corral rails. Ketch turned toward the buyers. Some of you may not know that Doran once worked for me. He accused my yard of dishonest weights without proof. When my clerk challenged him, Doran struck the man. Micah stepped forward. That is true. The buyers shifted. Agnes had known the fact since Boise. Public use was the weapon. My objection began with a 50-pound weight reading 43, she said. Not with Micah Doran, Ketch smiled. And yet the violent man stands at your side, a wealthy widow, a blacklisted drifter, and a grievance neither can prove. That is not business. It is need dressed as judgment. You will speak to me with respect, or your hired man will teach me. Agnes lifted one hand toward Micah. Stay back, she began to answer. But Ketch stepped nearer, fixing his attention on Micah. Tell them how you earn your place here, with your fists, or with whatever comfort a lonely woman mistakes for loyalty. The blow came before Agnes finished drawing breath. One strike. Ketch fell against the corral rail. Shouts broke across the yard. Micah stopped immediately. But the damage had already found its audience. Ketch touched his split lip and laughed. There is your proof. Agnes felt no fear of Micah. That made the betrayal sharper. His strength had not protected her. It had taken her answer and spoken over it. She drew the cracked watch from her vest and closed it in her hand. You can work here, she said. You cannot command here. Micah's face went still. Agnes, you cannot speak for me, strike for me, or shame Sable Draw in my name. She held his gaze. From this hour you are an ordinary hand. The first order Micah followed after losing command came from Eli Crane. Take the gray to the south lot, Eli said the next morning, trying not to sound as uncertain as he felt. Tom says he needs walking, not riding. Micah stood beside the hitching rail with his left arm held close beneath his coat. The shoulder had stiffened overnight, and lifting it above his chest brought pain into his jaw. He could have corrected the boy's tone. He could have reminded Eli, who had taught him to judge a tired horse before reaching for force. Instead, Micah took the gray's lead. "South lot," he said, "walking only." Eli nodded, relief passing too quickly across his face to hide. Agnes watched from the office window with the cracked silver watch in her vest pocket. The brief kiss among the basalt stones remained real. So did the blow beside the corral. One truth did not purchase pardon for the other. Micah worked as an ordinary hand. Tom Weller assigned him water troughs, fence checks, and ground work, until the shoulder loosened. He accepted each task without gathering the crew around his resentment. When the youngest hand hung a gate chain backward, Micah showed him where the link would bind under pressure and let the boy reset it himself. When Eli warned that a cinch strap had cracked near the buckle, Micah checked it, found the boy correct, and changed the strap without pretending he had seen the damage first. The crew noticed. Agnes noticed more. A man could behave well when authority made obedience flattering. She needed to know what he did when obedience cost him pride. On May 29th, she left Sable Draw before sunrise in the buckboard and carried no one with her. Micah asked only whether Tom should hold the north herd until her return. "Yes," she said. "No cattle through the lower wash." Understood. He did not ask where she was going. Boise City took most of the morning. Agnes found the former catchyard worker behind a feed store, carrying grain sacks for day wages. He had worked beside Micah 3 years earlier and knew enough about Darius Ketch to fear being remembered by him. "I am not asking you to accuse anyone," Agnes said. "I am asking what you saw." The man shifted a sack against the wall. Doran watched 3 lots come through. Good cattle, better than Ketch called them. Did he inspect the scale? Watched the beam, kept saying it caught before settling. Did he prove an alteration? No. Did the clerk strike him? No. The answer came quickly. Doran struck first. Agnes let that remain between them. Did he return later? Not that I saw. Threaten Ketch? No. Did you believe him about the weights? The worker glanced toward the feed store door before answering. I believed something was wrong. Cattle looked light in Ketch's yard and fair again near the rail pens, but belief didn't pay wages. Why did Micah speak when the rest of you stayed silent? Maybe because he was angry enough to risk being poor. The man rubbed grain dust from his sleeve. Maybe because he thought the truth would protect him. It didn't. Agnes thanked him. She offered no money for a useful answer and asked for no signature that fear would make him regret. His account confirmed what Micah had already admitted. The suspicion was credible. The violence was his, and the violence gave Ketch a better story than the cattle did. Before leaving Boise, Agnes called on 2 buyers who had once purchased outside Ketch's yard. Both received her politely. Neither agreed to witness a public comparison. One admitted Ketch had warned that any buyer participating would lose access to his holding pens and the ranchers who passed through them. The other advised Agnes to take the private price while it remained high. "A delayed sale can be repaired," she said. "Agreeing that theft is ordinary business is harder to mend." The buckboard reached Sable Draw near dusk. Micah was repairing a lower curl hinge under Tom's direction. His shoulder moved better, though he still guarded the highest reach. He did not leave the work when Agnes arrived. She went to the office, removed her gloves, and placed the watch beside the account book. Then she called him in. Micah stopped at the threshold. "Close the door," she said. He did, and remained standing. "I found a man who worked at Ketch Yard when you were dismissed." Micah's face gave little away. "What did he tell you?" "That the cattle often looked light, that you watched the beam catch, that you accused Ketch without proof, that you struck first." "Yes." He also said the others suspected the scale and kept silent to protect their wages. Micah lowered his gaze to the floorboards, then raised it again. "That sounds right. You gave Ketch a fact stronger than your accusation." "I did." Agnes rested one hand on the desk. "And 2 days ago, you did it again." Micah did not reach for defense. "I took your answer from you." "You did. I called it protection in my head before I hit him." His voice remained steady, but effort showed in the line of his mouth. "It wasn't. Protection would have left you standing where you chose to stand. That came closer to the injury than any apology shaped around regret." "I have no excuse," he continued. "Not for 3 years ago, not for your yard. I damaged your case and shamed your authority in front of men already looking for a reason to dismiss it. Do you expect command back? No. Do you expect the kiss to change my judgment?" Pain moved across his face more sharply than the shoulder had managed. "No, that kiss was given. It wasn't payment." Agnes believed him. Belief was not restoration. "If I keep you as a hand, I work as a hand. If Tom corrects you, I listen. If Eli is right, I say he is right. If the crew thinks I punished you too hard, they hear no complaint from me." He waited. "And if I dismiss you?" Agnes asked. "You settle my wages through the day. I leave before dark." No plea followed. Agnes looked at the man who had once believed truth excused anger, and at the worker now willing to lose his place rather than argue himself free of consequence. "Return to Tom," she said. "Light duty until the shoulder moves cleanly." Micah opened the door, then paused. "Agnes, yes, I am sorry." "Then make it visible." He did. Over the next 4 days, he accepted every boundary without turning obedience into a performance. He let Tom control the work. He allowed Eli to correct a missed count at the north gate. When the youngest hand tangled 2 ropes, Micah separated them, showed him the error once, and walked away before embarrassment became humiliation. He did not seek Agnes alone. He did not stand outside the office, hoping she would soften first. By June 3rd, his shoulder moved through ordinary work without stiffness. That morning, Agnes gathered the crew beside the main corral. Micah stood among the hands rather than before them. She held a single written sheet. "Micah Doran will act as general foreman through summer." Surprise moved through the yard. Micah remained still. Agnes faced him. "Daily cattle movement, horse rotation, crew assignments and work safety are yours. Sales, property, contracts, and any legal complaint remain mine. You will make no private agreement affecting Sable Draw. You will not confront Ketch or his men. You will make no public accusation until I have reviewed the evidence behind it." "Understood. If I remove your authority again, you return it without argument." "Yes. These terms are written because remorse is not a working system." "Fair." Agnes handed him the paper. His fingers closed around the lower edge. She let the back of her hand rest briefly against his knuckles before withdrawing. Not absolution, not a return to the kiss. A measured opening. Micah did not turn his hand to capture hers. "Take the morning report," she said. He faced the crew. "Tom, North Group stays on the upper bench. Eli, rotate the grey out and take the sorrel. No cattle through the lower wash until Mrs. Whitlock clears the bitterweed." The men moved. Near noon, a rider delivered Ketch's latest notice. No Sable Draw cattle would enter his yard unless Agnes signed his weight terms before July. She read it once and passed it to Micah. He did not tear the paper or curse the man who sent it. "What do you want done?" he asked. Agnes looked toward the finishing herd, then toward the locked-way shed where the honest 50-pound weight remained. "We stop asking Ketch for permission to prove him wrong." Agnes answered Ketch's July deadline by choosing a place where his permission carried no weight. On June 4th, she rode to Boise City with Micah beside the buckboard and the black iron test weight left locked inside the iron-bound chest at Sable Draw. She would not carry evidence into town until the witnesses, the location, and the order of proof were settled. The road was dry now, dust lifting behind the wheels in a pale ribbon. Micah gave her the morning herd report before they left, placed Tom Weller in charge, and repeated no instruction Agnes had already approved. By the time they reached the merchant offices, Boise City was crowded with freight wagons, cattlemen, and clerks waiting on summer prices. Darius Ketch stood beneath the shaded walk as if he had expected them. "Mrs. Whitlock," he said, "you received my terms." "I did." "Then you understand your cattle do not enter my yard without them." "Your yard is not the only ground cattle can stand on." Ketch's attention moved to Micah. "He has convinced you of that?" Micah remained one pace behind Agnes, hands open at his sides. "My deed convinced me," Agnes said, "and the railroad convinced me there are scales you do not own." A few men near the office door turned toward them. Ketch noticed the audience and raised his voice. "A freight platform is not a cattle yard. You intend to make a public spectacle because a blacklisted drifter filled your head with old grievance. My objection began before I knew his history. Your judgment has worsened since." Ketch stepped closer. "A woman with money can hire agreement by the month. That doesn't make the agreement honest." Micah's fingers tightened once, then opened again. He shifted half a step backward, leaving Agnes a clear space between Ketch and the street. Agnes removed one glove. Her hand remained steady. "On July 5th, Sable Draw will conduct a comparative weighing at the Nampa Freight Yard. One known 50-pound weight will be tested on the freight scale and on yours. The same 4 steers will cross both scales under the conditions already recorded. Independent ranchers may watch. Buyers may watch. You may watch." Ketch's expression hardened before he covered it. "You cannot compel me to bring equipment." "No, refusing will answer one question before the weighing begins." A rancher beside the chalkboard shifted closer to hear. Ketch looked toward Micah. "And what part does your violent foreman play?" Agnes answered, before Micah moved. "Cattle control, nothing more. He will not touch you, your clerk, your scale, or any man working it. He will make no accusation. He will move the animals when I instruct him." Micah met her gaze. Understood. Ketch stepped directly into his space. "You need her permission even to hate me now." Micah did not lift his hands. "I need no permission for what I feel, only for what I do on her ranch." The reply gave Ketch nothing to use. Agnes put her glove back on. July 5th. She entered the merchant's office and left Ketch standing beneath his own reputation. Securing witnesses proved harder than announcing the test. Samuel Vane agreed because he sold through several yards and owed Ketch no money. Silas Reed agreed, after Agnes promised only travel expenses and no share of any later claim. The freight agent at Nampa answered by letter 3 days later. He would permit 4 steers and 1 test weight on the platform before scheduled loading, provided no rail work was delayed and no one claimed the railroad endorsed either side. Agnes accepted every condition. The venue belonged to the railroad. The evidence would belong to the measurements. On June 12th, she and Micah returned to Boise City to confirm the hour with Vane and Reed. Ketch waited outside the same merchant office. This time he stood so close to Agnes that Micah could have reached him without taking a full step. Micah moved backward instead. Ketch laughed. Well trained. Agnes said, self-command often looks strange to men without it. Ketch's smile thinned. You think standing still repairs what he is? No, repeated conduct repairs trust. Standing still is today's work. Ketch turned to Micah. What happens when she is finished using you? Another yard won't touch you. A widow's favor is a poor retirement. Micah's jaw set. His hands remained visible. You have her ranch in front of you and still see only what a man might take from it, he said. That may be why you cannot understand either of us. Agnes gave no further answer. They completed the witness arrangements and walked back toward the buckboard, only after the merchant office had disappeared. Behind a line of freight wagons, did she stop? You stayed still. You told me to. That cannot be the only reason. Micah rested one hand on the wagon rail. No. What was the other? I remember what happened when I made your fight about my anger. His voice was low. I won't do it twice. Agnes stood close enough to see the effort the restraint had cost him. She reached for his hand. Micah did not close his fingers until she closed hers first. Then his grip settled around her glove, warm and controlled, holding without claiming. Wagons rattled past. Men called freight prices across the street. Agnes let several breaths pass. This is not permission to forget. I know. It is not forgiveness without condition. I know that too. It is evidence. His thumb moved once along the side of her hand. Then I won't waste it. Agnes released him and climbed into the buckboard. Neither mentioned the touch on the road home. It had said what words would only repeat. At Sable Draw, the test weight remained where Agnes had left it. On June 14th, she unlocked the iron-bound chest with the original key Sloat had returned on his foreman ring. Micah stood outside the weigh shed. He had no part in evidence custody beyond witnessing that she controlled it. Agnes checked the crescent chip, the 3 punched dots, and the worn left edge. Then she wrapped the iron in coarse sacking, placed it inside a stout wooden crate, tied the lid with cord, and lowered the crate back into the chest. The lock is old, Micah said. The key is older. Agnes turned it once and tested the lid. Sloat carried that ring for 6 years. He returned it, the key he wanted me to see. Micah glanced at the small warded opening. You think he had another made? I think a man who planned my sale before I refused it may have planned farther than one note. She locked the chest and kept the ring with her. That night, the ranch settled under a moon thin enough to leave the yard in broken shadow. Near midnight, the dog barked once from the direction of the weigh shed, then stopped. Agnes woke but heard no splintering wood, no running horse, no shout from the night watch. By dawn, the outer shed door remained closed. The chest sat where she had left it. The lock was still turned. Micah waited outside while Agnes opened it. The crate had not moved. The cord around the lid had been cut and reteed badly, the knot sitting higher than the one she had made. Agnes lifted the cover. The black iron weight remained inside. Crescent chip, 3 dots, worn edge, untouched. They wanted to know whether it was here. Micah said. Agnes examined the lock before answering. Around the key opening, fresh, bright scratches cut through the older darkened metal. No pry mark scarred the lid. No hinge had been forced. Someone had entered with a key that fit poorly but well enough. Agnes remembered Sloat dropping the foreman ring into her palm on the day he left, iron striking leather, with the confidence of a man returning everything he owed. She closed the crate and retied the cord with a new knot. He controlled this chest for 6 years. That isn't proof he kept a key. No, Agnes locked the lid again, but whoever came last night did not need to break anything. The intruder had left the weight because taking it then would have revealed too much, which meant the next attempt would come. When Agnes was committed to the road, the witnesses and the date catch already knew. The rancher's past had not merely left a traitor outside the gate. It had left him a way back in. The fresh scratches around the chest lock gave Agnes an answer she could use, though not the name she wanted. Whoever had entered the way shed possessed a key. That meant the next attempt could be invited. On June 16th, she unlocked the iron-bound chest before Samuel Vane and Silas Reed lifted out the black iron weight and set it on a folded blanket in the yard. Micah remained several paces away. He had helped design the comparison, but evidence custody belonged to Agnes. She turned the iron slowly. Crescent chip at the base, 3 punched dots beneath the handle, worn smooth along the left edge. Vane bent to inspect each mark. Reed followed. Agnes recorded their observations in plain words and asked both men to sign beneath them. She added no hidden scratch. The weight would reach Nampa in the same condition it had carried for years. Someone opened the chest to learn whether this was still here, Vane said. Will you change the lock? Not yet. Agnes looked toward the feed room, where broken hinges, old wagon fittings, and discarded iron lay in a corner. First, I want him to believe he succeeded. They packed scrap iron into a second wooden crate until it strained the arms of any man carrying it. Micah wrapped the pieces in the same coarse sacking used around the genuine weight. Agnes tied the lid with cord and lowered the decoy into the iron-bound chest. The real weight went inside a reinforced box beneath the buckboard seat. Agnes kept that key on a separate chain under her dress. Only Micah, Vane, and Reed knew the boxes had been exchanged. Tom Weller was told to make his usual rounds. Eli Crane was told nothing. A changed guard would warn the intruder more clearly than a locked door. For 3 nights, the chest remained untouched. On the 4th, the ranch dog barked twice near midnight. Agnes rose, pulled on her boots, and crossed to the dark office window. Micah came from the bunkhouse without a rifle. He stopped beside the wall, leaving the decision to her. A shadow moved between the barn and the way shed. The outer door opened. No wood split, no metal broke. Minutes later, the figure emerged carrying the crate against his chest and crossed toward the cottonwoods, where a horse waited beyond the fence. The darkness hid his face. The familiar set of his shoulders suggested more than it proved. Micah's weight shifted toward the door. Do you want me after him? No. He has the box. He has what I wanted him to take. The rider disappeared west. Agnes did not send pursuit. A captured thief with scrap iron might expose the trap before Ketch committed himself at Nampa. A successful theft would give him false confidence. At daylight, the chest stood open. The decoy was gone. No pry mark scarred the lid. The old lock bore another bright line where a key had turned against the warding. A duplicate, Micah said. Most likely. Sloat, most likely is not proof. Agnes shut the empty chest. We will give him a chance to bring proof closer. Within 2 days, word reached Boise City that Sable Draw's test weight had been stolen. No messenger admitted where the rumor began. Ketch allowed it to spread through buyers, freight men, and ranchers already expecting Agnes to withdraw the public comparison. She sent no correction. While Ketch waited for surrender, Micah prepared the cattle. The same 4 steers remained together. Their chalk numbers were renewed, but Agnes checked the natural markings herself. The white notch, near the red steer's hip, the blunt left horn, the dark ring around one eye, and the narrow white line beneath the 4th animal. Tom would hold the rear. Eli would work the eastern side. Micah would keep the 4 in the center group and preserve the conditions already recorded. No man conditions already recorded. No man leaves the herd to chase trouble, Agnes said, even if trouble rides close. Micah met her gaze, understood. They left Sable Draw before dawn on June 30th. The reinforced box rode beneath Agnes's seat. Vane and Reed travelled near the buckboard, never both leaving it at once. Morning stayed cool long enough for the herd to cover the first miles without strain. Micah held a steady walk and stopped before thirst made cattle press toward water. Near midday, the route narrowed between sage and a low embankment. 3 riders appeared on the ridge behind them. Their horses carried no Sable Draw marks. The men waited until the rear cattle entered the narrow reach, then came down fast, shouting and snapping ropes against their saddle skirts. The steers surged. Tom turned in the saddle. Ketch's men. Micah saw them. Agnes saw his horse angle half a step toward the nearest rider. The old choice opened before him. So did the new one. He turned across the herd's rear instead. "Slow the front." Eli repeated the order. Tom widened the rear line, giving frightened cattle room to spread instead of compressing them. One of the strangers swept close enough to throw dust across Micah's coat. "You letting the widow hold your reins now?" Micah did not answer. He kept his horse between the riders and the steers without chasing anyone. "Walk them," he called. "Don't fight speed with speed." Agnes climbed down from the buckboard and opened her account book. She recorded the time, the location, and the number of riders while Vane and Reed watched. One man laughed. "Writing won't put weight back on them." "No," Agnes called. "Water and proper handling will. Writing will tell buyers who tried to take it off." The riders made another pass. Micah held position. When the herd failed to break, they withdrew toward the ridge. Tom spat into the dust. "We could catch one." "We are not here to catch riders," Micah said. "We are here to deliver cattle under Mrs. Whitlock's terms." The larger victory was not that Ketch's men had failed to scatter the herd. It was that Micah had let them leave without turning Agnes's proof into another story about his temper. They took the longer river route and reached the planned camp near sunset. The 4 steers drank, fed, and settled beneath open sky. Tom and Eli took the first watch. Vane and Reed slept within sight of the buckboard. Agnes found Micah beside the low fire, reviewing the final approach to Nampa. She carried the cracked silver watch in her palm. "The last rest begins now," she said. "Time it until first light." Micah looked at the watch but did not reach immediately. "You could keep it?" "I could." Agnes held it out. "I am asking you." He took the silver case in his left hand. Their fingers closed around it together. Firelight caught in the broken crystal. "You saw those riders," Agnes said. "Yes." "You wanted to follow?" "Yes." "And you stayed with the cattle?" "That was the work." It was also the choice. She kept her hand over his. Micah waited. Agnes stepped closer and placed her arms around him. No danger forced the embrace. No injury gave it an excuse. She chose it because he had obeyed when disobedience would have satisfied him more. Micah held still until she settled against him. Then his arms came around her, firm but measured, one hand between her shoulder blades and the other at her waist. He did not draw her closer than she had chosen. Agnes rested against him long enough to feel his breathing slow. When she released him, he let her go at once. "Before dawn," she said. "I return the watch before dawn." He did. When Agnes woke, the silver case lay in her palm with the chain folded beneath it. The 4 steers were still resting. On July 1st, the herd reached Nampa under a hard blue sky. Freight wagons crowded the siding, and cattle called from holding pens beside the tracks. Before unloading the reinforced box, Agnes brought Vane, Reed, and the freight agent to the buckboard. She opened it in their presence. The crescent chip, 3 punched dots, and worn edge were checked against the signed description. The freight agent carried the weight into a locked storeroom inside his office. He wrote a plain receipt stating what he had accepted and where it would remain until July 5th. Vane and Reed signed beneath him. Agnes kept the receipt. Only then did Micah move the cattle into their assigned pens. He directed Tom to the rear gate and Eli to the eastern rail, never approaching Ketch's equipment. Across the yard, Calvin Sloat stood beside the private scale with one hand near the beam. His coat hung too heavily on one side. Agnes saw it. Micah saw it. He did not move toward Sloat. He turned to Agnes and waited. Micah waited for Agnes' order, while Calvin Sloat stood beside Ketch's scale with one side of his coat hanging lower than the other. "Take the 4 steers into the assigned pen," she said. "Keep them under the conditions we recorded." His attention remained on her. "And Sloat, he is not your work." Micah turned his horse toward the cattle. No warning, no threat. Sloat watched him go, with disappointment tightening his mouth. From July 2nd through the 4th, Agnes removed every opening Ketch might use. Samuel Vane and Silas Reed witnessed the final waterings. Tom Weller and Eli Crane alternated night watches near the 4 marked steers. The freight agent checked the locked storeroom each morning with Agnes and 1 ranch witness present. The black iron weight remained inside. No one carried it into the yard. No one handled it for curiosity. Micah directed cattle movement, feed, and rest. He did not approach Ketch's scale or exchange a word with Sloat. Ketch spent those days talking to buyers. He said Agnes had arrived without proof. He said the stolen ranch weight had forced her to hide behind railroad equipment. Agnes offered no correction. Let him trust the theft. By sunrise on July 5th, ranchers, buyers, freight workers, and several townspeople had gathered between the holding pens and the platform scale. A county deputy stood near the freight office because Agnes had reported the break-in, the road interference, and the possibility of trouble. He had no authority to decide cattle value. He was there to keep men from deciding it with fists. Agnes entered the freight office with Vane, Reed, and the agent. The agent unlocked the storeroom, brought out the reinforced box, and laid the July 1st receipt beside it. Agnes opened the lid. Crescent chip at the base, 3 punched dots beneath the handle, worn left edge. All 4 matched the signed description. Vane and Reed confirmed the marks before Agnes carried the weight outside. Ketch's expression changed when he saw the iron. Only slightly. "Enough. You told people it was stolen," Agnes said. "I repeated what reached Boise. Then someone brought you a useful lie." She placed the weight on the neutral freight platform. The freight agent adjusted the balance. The beam lifted, wavered, and settled level. 50 pounds, he announced. The number moved through the crowd in low voices. Agnes asked Vane to carry the weight to Ketch's portable scale while Reed walked beside him. Sloat took his position at the beam. He shifted the sliding poise, watched the indicator, and called 43. No one spoke at first. Ketch stepped forward. Different mechanisms, different beams. A freight platform is built for freight, not private yard work. Then cattle will answer, Agnes said. Micah opened the holding gate. The red-sided steer, with the white notch near its right hip, entered first. He guided the animal with his horse, released pressure as soon as the steer faced the platform, and kept the crowd from tightening around it. The freight scale settled. Agnes recorded the number. Vane and Reed read it aloud in turn. Micah then moved the same steer 20 yards to Ketch's scale. No water, no feed, no delay. Ketch reading came materially lower. The blunt-horned steer followed. Then the animal with the dark ring around one eye. Then the steer with the narrow white belly line. Each crossed the neutral scale first, and Ketch second. Each lost weight without losing flesh. Buyers stopped writing. A rancher near the rail muttered, 4 times. Ketch raised his voice. Animals shift. Beams settle differently. She arranged the order to favor the railroad scale. Agnes held up the record book. The order was written before we left Sable Draw. Same animals, same feed, same water, same rest, same road. Independent witnesses. Witnesses chosen by you. Chosen because they owe you nothing. Ketch turned toward the crowd. This is revenge staged by a widow and a violent hired man who has hated me for 3 years. Micah remained at the cattle gate with his hands on the reins. Micah Doran has touched neither your scale nor your men, Agnes said. These numbers do not belong to his temper. Ketch's face hardened. The weighing is over. Load the equipment. Sloat moved toward the beam. His right hand disappeared beneath his coat. Micah saw it from across the yard. His body prepared to move, then stopped. Agnes. Her name carried over the cattle and the murmuring crowd. He pointed. Every nearby face turned toward Sloat. The man pulled out a wrench first. Something heavier struck against his ribs beneath the coat. He stepped between the scale and the witnesses. Vane blocked one side. A freight worker blocked the other. Take your hand away from the beam, Agnes said. Sloat looked to Ketch. That glance answered too much. The deputy crossed the yard. Step back. Sloat swung the wrench and struck the freight worker across the upper arm. The man staggered. The deputy and another yard hand caught Sloat before he reached the tracks. From inside his coat, they removed a second sliding poise, clean and unaltered. A small iron key dropped from his pocket and struck the packed ground. Agnes recognized its warded shape before anyone touched it. The duplicate to the Sable Draw chest. I have never seen that key or that poise, Ketch said. Then you will not object to comparing the two, Agnes answered. The freight agent called for the blacksmith, who maintained wagon fittings near the siding. The man removed the poise, already fixed to Ketch's beam, and set it beside the one taken from Sloat. The scale poise was heavier, not by enough to notice in a hand used to iron, enough to change every reading. A narrow seam ran around one end beneath grease and dust. The blacksmith warmed the seam with a lamp, softened the wax, and worked a concealed cap free. Lead showed inside the drilled cavity. He tipped the poise. A fitted plug of the metal slid into his palm. This one's been weighted, he said. A rancher asked, What does that do? The blacksmith held up both pieces, makes the poise balance closer to the pivot. The beam marks less weight than it's carrying. 50 became 43. Finished cattle became thin on paper. Ketch pointed at Sloat. He altered it. He had access to my yard. Sloat strained against the deputy's grip. You paid me to take her weight. Ketch went still. You're lying. You said she'd quit when the proof was gone. Enough, the deputy said. He took the duplicate key, the standard poise, and the altered one into custody with the freight agent and witnesses watching. Sloat was detained for the witnessed assault and attempted interference. Ketch was not arrested. The deputy had seen tampering and violence, not every agreement behind them. That question would go to the county inquiry. The freight agent refused to accept any figure from Ketch's scale for railroad billing or loading calculations on railroad property until the matter was resolved. The effect moved faster than any formal order. Buyers stepped away from Ketch, not with speeches, with revised plans. One asked Agnes whether the Sable Draw cattle remained for sale under the neutral weights. Another offered a price above Ketch's April figure, but below the value Agnes's records supported. She rejected it. The next offer was fair. She negotiated the loading terms, shrink allowance, and payment schedule in plain view, then signed only after Vane and Reed checked the figures. No revenge price, no silence clause, real weight for real money. When payment was counted, Agnes set aside bonuses for Tom, Eli, the younger hand, and every worker who had protected the herd's condition. Micah received the foreman wage already agreed. Nothing extra for being the man Ketch had failed to provoke. Near sunset, Agnes found him beyond the freight sheds where the loading noise had softened. "You should accept my resignation," he said. "Why?" "Because one blow at Sable Draw nearly buried what you proved here. It harmed my case, yes. And today I did what you told me. You did more than stand still. You saw the interference and gave it back to me." Micah lowered his gaze briefly. "That does not erase the punch." "No." Agnes stepped closer. "Your punch remains true. So does your restraint." She placed her palm against his face. He did not reach for her. Not until she rose and kissed him. This kiss was not brief, like the one among the basalt stones. It carried anger survived, trust rebuilt, and desire no longer confused with pardon. Micah's hand settled at her waist only after she leaned into him. His other hand rested between her shoulder blades, steady and restrained. When they parted, his forehead hovered near hers. "Do not offer me another noble departure," Agnes said. "Not unless you mean it. I don't want to leave." Then tomorrow we discuss staying. Back at Sable Draw, Agnes placed a 1-year foreman agreement on the office desk. Beside it lay the cracked silver watch, its hands moving beneath the broken crystal. Micah stopped at the threshold. Agnes touched the contract. "This is the work." Then she touched the watch. "Tomorrow, we decide what the rest is." At sunrise, the 1-year agreement still lay beside the cracked silver watch, and Micah had not crossed the office threshold to claim either. Agnes found him in the north corral, directing the morning rotation as if exposing Ketch's scale had changed nothing about cattle needing water. Tom Weller took the heavier rope. Eli Crane checked the gray gelding's back before saddling. Micah listened to both men, corrected one gate assignment, then stepped aside when Agnes approached. "The North group can wait 10 minutes, she said. "Come to the office." He handed Tom the worksheet. "You have the crew." Tom nodded, and Micah followed Agnes without asking whether he was being dismissed again. Inside, morning light lay across the agreement. The black iron test weight had been returned to the locked chest before dawn. The silver watch remained on the desk, its hands moving beneath the divided crystal. Agnes stayed standing. Micah stopped on the other side of the desk and removed his hat. "Read it," she said. He lifted the paper. The terms were plain. 1 year as general foreman, fixed monthly wages, a seasonal bonus tied to the ranch's profit after payroll, feed, repairs, and sale costs, authority over daily cattle movement, horse rotation, crew assignments, and work safety. No authority to sell land, cattle, breeding stock, or equipment without Agnes's approval. Either party could end the agreement at the close of a season with wages settled in full. Micah read the final lines twice. No share of the land. No. No promise of one later. No. And if either of us ends the courtship, Agnes met his gaze. The job stands whether courtship does or not. He set the paper down. Then this is not payment for Nampa. It is payment for work. For not striking Sloat, for running the herd while I controlled the proof, for keeping the cattle watered when chasing those riders would have satisfied you more, for returning authority when I removed it, for doing the work after I gave it back. Agnes touched one corner of the agreement. Nampa did not erase the day you struck Ketch. The terms remember both. Micah nodded. Fair. Do not accept because you are grateful. I am not grateful enough to work a year for bad wages. The answer nearly drew a smile from her. He continued before she could hide it. The wages are fair. The authority is clear. I accept. Then sign it. Micah reached for the pen, but his hand stopped above the page. There is another matter. Agnes's pulse changed. The rest. Yes. He left the pen where it was. I do not want Sable Draw as the price of staying. It is not being offered. I know. I need you to hear me say it. He stood with his hat held against one thigh, no crowd near enough to impress, and no danger available to excuse honesty. I want the work because I am good at it. I want the wages because I earn them. I want my own savings under my own name. His voice lowered. And I want you because I love you. Agnes did not move. The words carried none of Ketch's bargains and none of Micah's old anger. They asked for no land, no pardon, no immediate answer. Micah went on. I loved you before Nampa. I knew it when you suspended me, and I wanted to argue, but knew you were right. I knew it when you trusted me with the watch again. I knew it when those riders came down, and the hardest thing I could do was remain where you had placed me. His fingers tightened around the hat brim. Love has not cured my temper. It will not excuse me if I fail again. I am telling you what is true, not asking you to forget anything. Agnes came around the desk. I have no intention of giving away my ranch. I know, or myself. I know that too. Then hear what is true for me. She stopped close enough to touch him, but did not yet. I love you. His composure broke in one small breath. Agnes placed both hands against his chest. I love the man who asked before cutting my rope, the man who changed his route when mine was better, the man who failed me and stayed long enough to make his apology visible. Micah's hands remained at his sides, waiting. You may touch me, she said. He lifted them slowly, but Agnes closed the distance first. She kissed him with no frightened cattle, hostile buyer, or watching crowd to force the choice. His arms came around her only after she leaned fully into him. One hand rested between her shoulder blades, the other at her waist. The kiss deepened without haste, warm and certain, and when Agnes drew back, Micah rested his forehead near hers without asking for more. I love you, he said again. I heard you the first time. I may need practice saying it, not in front of the crew. No, ma'am. Agnes raised one eyebrow. Do not call me ma'am while kissing me. A real smile reached his face. That term may require revision. They signed the employment agreement before discussing anything further. Work first, choice beside it. They agreed to court openly through summer. No secret arrangement that allowed gossip to recast Agnes's authority as infatuation. No immediate marriage, while cattle, legal statements, and ranch accounts still required attention. When the autumn figures were settled, they would decide whether courtship should become an engagement. Micah asked no promise beyond that. Agnes offered none. The next questions arrived by mail before the week ended. Buyers who had withdrawn from Ketch's yard wanted to know whether the Sable Draw weight could be borrowed. One offered a fee, another asked to keep it for 3 days while purchasing cattle from neighboring ranchers. Agnes refused every request. The weight would not leave her custody, and fairness would not become another private monopoly. Instead, she set appointed checking days at Sable Draw. Buyers could bring their portable scales. Ranchers could bring known weights. 2 witnesses would observe every comparison. Results would be written where both parties could read them. No fee, no private favor. Micah reviewed the notice at the office threshold. This will bring wagons through the yard on appointed days and arguments. Then the arguments can stand beside the beam. You will need separate holding lane so buyers do not cross the working pens. Can you build one without disturbing the north rotation? Yes. He handed the notice back. Your evidence, your rules, your cattle lanes, my work. The distinction no longer sounded defensive. It sounded settled. By July 14th, the first neighboring rancher arrived with a 20-pound shop weight and a buyer's portable beam. Agnes conducted the comparison herself, while Micah kept the cattle yard moving beyond the fence. The visiting scale read true. The buyer signed beneath the result. Nothing dramatic followed. No accusation. No crowd. Just 2 men doing business with fewer places to hide dishonesty. That evening, Agnes found Micah beside the west gate preparing a small pasture move. The cracked watch lay open in her palm. 20 minutes after water, she said. Longer if they crowd. Micah reached automatically, then stopped before touching it. Agnes placed the silver case into his hand and folded his fingers around it. Return it after the move. I will. He did. When he came back, darkness had settled over the corrals. Micah placed the watch in her palm, then bent and kissed her forehead before stepping away. Agnes caught his sleeve. He stopped. She drew him back and kissed him once. Not from urgency, but because ordinary affection was now permitted to exist beside ordinary work. Beyond them, cattle moved through the gate under Micah's direction. Inside the office, the signed agreement waited in Agnes's account book. He ran the daily work of Sable Draw. She owned every acre, signed every sale, and chose every boundary. For the first time, neither truth threatened the other. By September 5th, the men who came to Sable Draw brought known weights before they brought cattle contracts. Some arrived, embarrassed by the precaution. Others carried years of suspicion they had never dared voice, while Darius Ketch controlled the nearest dependable path to buyers. Agnes received each man under the same terms. The black iron weight never left her custody. Its crescent chip, 3 punched dots, and worn left edge were shown before every comparison. 2 witnesses watched. Every result was written where buyer and seller could read it together. No fee, no private favor, no man permitted to call fairness generosity. That morning, a buyer from the western bench checked his portable scale before bidding on 60 Sable Draw steers. Agnes placed the 50-pound weight on the platform. The beam rose, trembled, and settled level. 50, the buyer said. Again, Agnes answered. He repeated the test, 50. Only then did Micah open the first holding gate. The cattle moved through in rested groups under his direction, watered on schedule, and given room to see the rails ahead. Tom Weller handled the entry side without being forced into work that punished his stiff knee. Eli Crane worked the release gate and checked each animal before reaching for pressure. The youngest hand counted aloud and corrected himself when Micah pointed to a pair hidden behind the dust. No shouting, no frightened steer crushed against wood. no man proving authority through noise. Micah had run the daily work of Sable Draw through the heat of summer without another breach of Agnes's terms. When she changed a route, he changed the order. When a hand was right, he said so. When buyers tried to ask him about price, he sent them to the woman who owned the cattle. The second fair weight contract was signed before noon. Its value covered the crew bonuses, repair of the west fence, winter feed, and every ordinary expense Agnes had entered against the season. The ranch reserves remained untouched. She settled the autumn accounts that morning. Every name had an envelope. Tom received a bonus for carrying more responsibility without turning it into complaint. Eli and the youngest hand received the raises they had earned through summer. Micah received the fixed wages and seasonal share written into his agreement. No extra payment for Nampa, no secret reward for love. Agnes counted the money once and slid the envelope across the office desk. Micah counted it once in return, then entered the amount into a small savings book from the Boise bank. "You kept most of the summer wages," Agnes said. He closed the book. "I had little reason to spend them. A new saddle would be reasonable. The one I own still carries me. A second horse? Sable Draw feeds the horses I use for Sable Draw. Then, what are you saving for?" Micah rested, the book beside the envelope. "A future that does not depend on your property." The answer held no distance, only self-respect. Agnes understood the difference. The morning mail had also brought a copy of Calvin Sloat's written statement from Boise City. He admitted opening the west gate, stealing the decoy crate, and attempting to exchange the proper poise for the lead-loaded one at Nampa. He admitted having a duplicate key made while he was still foreman at Sable Draw. A livery worker in Boise had confirmed seeing Sloat meet Ketch before the theft, though he had not heard what passed between them. Ketch continued denying that he ordered the fraud. The county inquiry remained active. No judge had yet decided the full measure of his guilt. Buyers had made their own decision faster. Ketch's yard had lost its largest contracts, and ranchers now demanded neutral comparisons before accepting private weights. Agnes preferred the slower legal truth to a quicker lie told in her favor. Sloat's statement did not make every accusation proven. It made enough of them answerable. Near dusk, she left the office with the accounts closed, the crew paid, and the final figures entered in ink. The cracked silver watch lay open on the windowsill, its hands moving beneath the broken crystal. Below the office, inside the weigh shed, the Sable Draw scale beam hung level above the black iron weight. Micah waited near the barn, with both horses saddled. He checked his own cinch, then hers, but did not take her reins. "Northgate or River Shelf?" he asked. Agnes studied the sky. Thin clouds lay beyond the western ridge, and the first cool edge of autumn moved through the cottonwoods. "Northgate. We inspect the upper fence, then circle the herd from the east. That adds 3 miles. It keeps us off loose basalt after sunset." Micah mounted. Northgate. They rode through the yard while the last workers crossed toward supper. Sable Draw no longer quieted because men had abandoned it. It quieted because the work had been completed. At the rise above the hay meadow, Micah drew his horse to a stop. Agnes reined in beside him. Below them, the ranch stretched toward the river in bands of dry gold, sage, and darkening cottonwood. Cattle moved across the north pasture in a slow, healthy line. No miracle waited in the view. Fences would fail again. Winter would demand judgment. The legal inquiry might take months. A fair sale had not made Agnes suddenly rich because she had never been poor. What had changed was harder to put into an account book. The ranch no longer required one person's authority to erase another's dignity. Micah removed his hat. The autumn figures are settled. They are. You said we would decide after that, I remember. His pulse showed once near his throat. I want to marry you. The words came without speech-making. Agnes let them remain plain. Micah continued. Your answer does not change the work agreement. Sable Draw stays yours. My wages stay mine. If you say no, I do not punish the ranch for it. And if I say yes, we decide the rest together. Where would we live? Where you choose, provided there is a place near the door for muddy boots. That may require written terms. I expected as much. She let one breath pass, not to test him, but to feel the freedom of answering without pressure. Yes. Micah's face softened, but he did not reach for her until she held out her hand. The wedding will be after spring calving, she said. Agreed. That was quick. I learned to recognize a good route when you point one out. Agnes took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and steady. She leaned across the space between their horses and kissed his temple. No danger made it urgent. No crowd made it proof. We still have a fence to inspect, she said. Yes, ma'am. Agnes raised an eyebrow. That term was revised. Only while kissing. You are fortunate I am not kissing you now. The evening is young. She laughed, and the sound followed them down the slope. In the office behind them, the cracked watch continued marking time beneath its divided crystal. In the way shed below, the beam remained level. Agnes and Micah rode toward the North Range side by side, with the route chosen and the work still ahead. No one was counting how many days he had left.